Don't we have amazing teachers in this district? And I want to say it's wonderful to see so many teachers and parents, both from PS 321 and from other parts of our community here. It's great. I also just want to acknowledge Jim Brennan, our assembly person, who has been a voice of reason about high-stakes testing in a state government that is not reasonable about high-stakes testing, and we are very appreciative of that, Jim. So I want to talk for a few minutes from a principal's perspective. I've been principal, I'm Liz Phillips. I've been principal here 15 years. I've been in the building for 27 years as a teacher, an early childhood coordinator, and then principal. I'm very much in favor of accountability, as is everyone on this stage. All of us at 321 feel accountable to our students, to the parents, to our colleagues. We believe in assessment. We assess all the time, sitting side by side with the kids, reading with them, looking at math work, looking at student writing. We can't teach effectively without that. And I'm personally not even against standardized tests. They can give us some information. What I'm strongly opposed to is the misuse of the data from the testing and the ways in which this questionable data has such high stakes for children, for teachers, for principals, for schools. The spring state tests last spring were very problematic. As many people have noted, they were simply too long. For third graders, testing time has increased by 163% since 2010. Cut scores this past year were set intentionally so that close to 70% of children in New York State would fail. It would take a lot more time than I have to go into all the issues about the testing, but I want to say a couple more things about it. As I've said at several grade-by-grade parent meetings here, there is something very wrong with a test, with an ELA test, when a literate adult, me, reads a passage and cannot answer a single question without rereading it. That's because the questions, as other people have said, were petty details tied to specific numbered lines that really had very little to do with the deeper meaning of the tests. Those tests were not, in my mind, Common Core aligned in any way. The Common Core, and I'm sure there's some differences of opinion here, but the Common Core has some value. It has become totally tainted because of the testing, because the test did not reflect the Common Core standards. The length of the test, as many people have said, meant that kids were rushing. It was, I think, what Rhonda said about what she's going to teach her kids about pacing is right. That's what did we learn from them giving the test that we might do differently? We have to tell kids that they've got to pace themselves, go quickly. You know, I've had parents come to me and say, I don't understand, my child is a great writer, but in the breakdown on ARIS, it says that she's weak in writing. And I said, well, a lot of the writing was towards the end of the test. Some kids didn't get to it. Another thing about the tests that is not talked about a lot is that they are norm reference tests. They are designed to sort kids. They are designed in such a way that in the field testing process, if too many children get a question correct, the question is thrown out. You cannot, in a norm reference test, have everybody ever pass a test or close to everybody. That defies the nature of the test. You know, about 20 years ago, there was a wonderful movement in education that I was very involved in that talked about criterion reference testing where it would be possible for every child if they mastered the material to pass the test. Nobody is talking about the nature of the testing and the need for criterion reference tests in public education. Now, there have been bad norm reference tests around for a long time, some years worse than others, but what has changed dramatically in the time I've been principal, and even more dramatically in the time since my own children, who were 36 and 32, were in school, is that the stakes have changed. To me, one of the most negative things that has happened in education in the last 10 years is tying test scores to report card grades for schools, to school closings in New York City, and most recently, and I think most damaging, to teacher and principal evaluation. I'm part of a group of about 1,500 New York State principals that last year wrote a letter opposing the new teacher evaluation system. The State Department of Ed did not listen. Some people did. Some more people are listening now, as parents and teachers across the state are appalled at the results of the testing, the impact on their children and on their children's teachers. And I think somebody before said I think it was Sam, parents are the ones who are going to be listened to. They are not listening to principals. You might think that 1,500 principals, including principals from the highest performing districts in the state, speaking out would have an impact. It didn't. I think the idea that the state believes that it's a step forward to have close to 70% of our children failing is shocking. As parents, as teachers, we understand that that is not the way to motivate children to learn. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the scores themselves are very questionable. For example, in one suburban district, 58% of 8th graders in accelerated math scored below proficiency level on the 8th grade state math test, but passed the New York State Regents in algebra 1 month later. There's also a sense that several researchers have written about, that the benchmark that the state has set for passing is based on an equated SAT score that is actually higher than what the College Board says is a college-ready SAT score. Unfortunately, though, there's still a sense that, I think among the general public, that the data is accurate, that it's useful, and that it will help us reward good teachers and get rid of bad ones. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, ironically, what principals are finding this year is that because so much weight is put on the test scores in the new evaluation, principals, I was at a meeting where there were some principals who had first-year teachers who in the past could be relatively easily discontinued if they were ineffective based on the principal's assessment, and they're being told by superintendents that they cannot do that this year because we have to wait for those test scores to come in. In yesterday's New York Times editorial, the proposal was, among other things, that highly effective teachers should be paid more money. What the Times doesn't say is that whether a teacher is rated highly effective or not depends on very small changes in student test scores from year to year, with a sample size of 25, 30, or fewer students. And this is the part that is going to be shocking to many parents, they might not even be students that teacher teaches. Let me explain. In New York City elementary schools this year, teachers who teach subjects other than ELA or math, for example, art, music, phys ed, must be judged on ELA or math test scores. Now, sounds ridiculous. I'm actually very happy about that because the alternative is that we would have tests in gym, art, music. So frankly, I would much rather keeping it the way it is. We'll judge on ELA and math scores, but the idea that you would then take those ridiculous ratings and pay people more money if they got highly effective, or fire them, potentially if they got ineffective, is absolutely ludicrous. We know from the experience of other districts across the state and from our own experience with the TDRs how meaningless and inaccurate the scores can be. I honestly don't think I would have believed it if I hadn't actually seen the TDR scores for our school. Because we at one point had a teacher whose average score went from the kids coming in had 3.97, that's out of a top score of 4.5 for their children coming in from the third grade test, and leaving after the fourth grade test had 3.92. Statistically insignificant change, very high, significantly above grade level. That teacher was in the 6th percentile. In the TDRs, there was a huge margin of error and wild fluctuations. One teacher here went from the 89th percentile to the 12th percentile, and actually she and I both agreed she was a more effective teacher the year of the 12th percentile. Although this is a wonderful school where teachers, administrators, and parents work collaboratively. Even here, as I think you heard from the teachers from our school, there has been demoralization, especially since that TDR fiasco. I don't think that we really believed it could happen that these scores could be published and that they could carry such weight. I can only imagine what it must be like in a failing school or with a new principal where there's been no time to establish trust. And all of a sudden, we have this system that is insane. We do, as Rhonda said, we've had tremendous turnover in 5th grade. Teachers who just feel that they need a change from that kind of pressure. And, there's some other reasons for people moving grades, but it's very sad. It's very sad to see teachers who are great at teaching a particular grade level who don't want to be there anymore. I think we've been pretty fortunate to not narrow the curriculum too much here, but as everybody has said, I think one of the impacts of that is going to be widening the achievement gap. Because we can at this school, because we have the luxury of kids who come from literate homes where they mainly speak English, where they get a lot of, they come in ready to learn, and they are going to score overall with great teaching pretty well on the tests. So we're not worried that someone's going to close our school. We don't have to think about that. It's very different in some other schools. I want to say one other thing about the current evaluation system. Effective evaluation is important, of course, and it should be about helping teachers improve practice or helping principals improve practice. The nature of the new evaluation system, where the test scores play a very significant role in a teacher's rating, makes it harder for me as a principal to support teachers and to help move them forward. It's particularly difficult because of the time-consuming nature of the other part of the evaluation system, which is observations, where we have to rate 22 components of a rubric, and we have to observe teachers 4 to 6 times a year, rating them each of those times, and hold 2 one-on-one meetings. If you do the math in a school with close to 100 teachers, we're talking about 600 to 800 contacts. That's the assistant principals and I. We can kind of make it work here because we do have such a history and we can be collaborative. But again, in a school that doesn't have that history, I can't quite imagine what it would be like that the way you're getting to know your staff as a principal is by going in and rating them on 22 components. And even here, I will say what I miss this year is the time to be in classrooms less formally. We do have informal observations, but they're formal informal observations in that we're rating teachers. I'd like to do more of what I've always done, which is be more collaborative in the classroom, do some co-teaching, work with the assistant principals in have really done a lot of that over the years, and it's much harder to do that now just because of the time. Just end with a couple more things. One of the most damaging aspects, I think, of the new evaluation system is that ultimately it can really undermine collaboration. There's a real disincentive to collaborating because, like teachers are judged against each other, teachers are judged on a curve. Because we're talking about progress of students, if the third grade teachers prepare the students too well, that hurts the fourth grade teachers. I'm not saying it will because truthfully, the scores are so fluky that I don't even think it necessarily does have an impact, but is there the perception that it has an impact? I mean, we're very lucky here because we have an amazing teaching staff and we continue to collaborate, and I don't see that changing. But can I see in other places, can I see if people's jobs are at stake, that might change the nature of the community? Yeah, I can see that happening. But I think there is hope. People are fighting back now. We have a new mayor coming in who will hopefully bring in some new education policy that isn't so dependent on test scores. Some of it is beyond his control on the state level, though certainly the mayor of New York City can put some pressure on the state, but there are also things within his control, like middle school admissions, like progress reports. I don't believe the current system can last, but it's a matter of how much damage is done before it changes. I think we need to all make our voices heard. Thank you.